Why is it so hard to get started? Why is it so difficult to be consistent with things? Why is it so just hard to stick to like what you actually want to achieve, like what you want your life to look like in 10 years, let's say. Like I'm sure a lot of us have many positive imaginations on what we want our lives to look like in 10 years or so. And for the most part, they're positive. You know, maybe you want to have a home already. You want to be financially independent, maybe start a family and just be responsible overall. You know, being able to take care of yourself, being able to provide. And that's good and all. But the problem is, just getting started. I find getting started or just starting overall to be the hardest part of it all. We all have these imaginations and these results and goals that we want to achieve, but we just don't start. There's this whole feeling of, feeling ready when to do this, but that whole thing is just not true. You'll never feel ready to get started on something. You just do it one day, no matter how you feel, whether you feel super motivated or super unmotivated, and you start either way. And that's pretty much your feeling ready moment. Like that's when you'll actually start like to work towards what you want. And it goes from there. You just be consistent with it and you actually stick to it because there's no like this whole thing about just big motivation just to get started. Like it's good to have for sure. It'll definitely boost your working capabilities or whatever you're trying to achieve, but motivation doesn't last. Consistency does, and that's what you need to focus on. Not the motivation, not the just imagining in your head and stuff like that. It's the consistency and being able to actually stick to it that you'll actually see some results. And these results are most likely going to take time. They're not going to be happening instantaneously. They're not going to be happening tomorrow or next week or not even next month, depending on what you want to achieve. Maybe you want to learn about maybe entrepreneurship. You want to get started in entrepreneurship. You want to maybe start some kind of personal project you work towards, maybe school or just learning a language, honestly. It could really apply to anything that you think about. And these goals that you achieve or these goals that you set, it's what's going to help you like have that dream life of yours that you want in 10 years or so. But this whole thing about just it being so hard to get started, it's relatable a lot. I relate to that so hard. I'm not saying that it's easy for me. I always have these imaginations that, I want to get started on learning this thing tomorrow. And it's usually, for me at least, it's usually a source of income. Like me wanting to make money, like have some sort of income. And, that'll actually help me provide for myself. And, I always get these thoughts and, actually putting in the work. That's the part that a lot of people don't want to do. They don't want to put in the work and effort because social media, you see, tends to paint this false reality in our minds when it comes to these successful people. They make it seem like it's easy, super easy. And I'm not going to lie, it actually is super easy. At least now in our generation, because think about it, it's realistically speaking, it is a lot easier to make money nowadays compared to our parents' generations and the way they worked for money. We have the internet, we have tech, we have AI now. It's like easier now more than ever to actually make money. But there are still some obstacles that you need to try to navigate in order to actually make that happen. There's trust. I think trust is a big part when it comes to actually making money. And let's say maybe you want to work in sales. You want to be able to trust the people that you're working with. You want to be able to trust maybe a person that's mentoring you. Seeing if this thing's legit. Maybe vetting if this whole thing is like legit or not, if it's gonna work for you. And to be honest, I think that's the only difficult part of it. Actually finding like a trustworthy source of actually like, making money and stuff. But the scary thing though is that it's really easy to lose motivation. Like not the motivation, but it's really easy to lose that drive of you just wanting to start because social media also tends to have these people and you're usually like kids, people younger than me, and each year I feel like it's getting younger and younger, in which these maybe 15, 16-year olds are super rich. You know, they're making a lot of money. And me, I'm 21 right now, and when I see that, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of hits hard. Like it's actually like, holy, like I could have been doing that when I was like 15 or 16, and I could have maybe already like already had my first car by like 19 or something. Maybe even my own place, like apartment, maybe even house, depending on how much you made. But you know, I think that is a factor that drives a lot of people away. Seeing people who are younger than you being more successful than you are right now. And it just causes you to lose that motivation. And it just doesn't make you want to start, you know, because you start to have these negative, like, confidence issues, maybe self esteem, saying, like, I'm not worthy at all of doing this. Like, it's just this whole negative charade of thoughts that come into your head. But that's the other thing. You are your worst enemy. And you're probably the only one who will ever talk to yourself that way, you know, or who will ever tell you that, like, like your own imaginations or your own thoughts that you tell yourself are just, they are your worst enemy. They're your biggest demotivator, they're your biggest killer in your dreams, and it's not good. It's not good to think that way. The thing is, what I'm trying to say is that you are capable. You are capable of so much. All of us are. I know I am. I journal it down as much as I can to myself, try to write some affirmation to myself that I am capable and that I am willing to do this. I know I am. I know one day I will. Because, holy, if I let more time go by and me just not starting or doing anything, like, I would be really upset with myself. And I know my future self is definitely, like, screaming at me right now, probably to just get started. But yeah, you just gotta get started. It's really all, it's all really that simple. You just start and be willing to put in that hard work and effort. Anyways, that's all I had. Just this little ramble about why it's just so hard to get started and kind of my thoughts on that whole thing. So, hope you enjoyed watching.